All right, strap yourselves in because today we're going supersonic with a deep dive into Top Gun. Got the original screenplay, and honestly, just holding this thing in my hands, I kind of feel the need for analysis, you know?
I hear you.
So let's break down what made this 1985 film such a massive hit, focusing especially on the script itself.
You know what really gets me about this screenplay? It grabs you right from the get-go. That opening scene on the USS Kitty Hawk, F-14 Tomcat landing during a typhoon. Intense. Throws you right into the world we're about to enter.
Oh, for sure. Sets the tone right away, like you said. Not just action for the sake of action.
Yes.
And that energy, it carries right into the dialogue. Maverick and Goose, even when things are tense, they've got that back and forth. Adds this layer of humor and camaraderie.
It's infectious.
Isn't it?
Totally. It humanizes these elite pilots, makes them relatable. And speaking of Maverick, fascinating character arc. He's not just your typical cocky underdog. There's this recklessness to him, pushing the limits, you know, real 80s hero vibe.
Definitely. You said 80s hero. And yeah, he's striving to prove himself. But there's almost a self-destructive edge there, too, when you say, like, he's battling something more than just the other pilots.
Oh, absolutely. Adds a whole other layer to his journey. It's not just about winning for him. It's his own demons, his father's legacy. That depth, that's what makes him so compelling.
And let's not forget the romance. Maverick and Charlie adds this whole other dimension. Tension, chemistry. I mean, come on. Forbidden romance, fighter jets, high-stakes training.
Classic opposites attract Charlie. She's the brains, right? The intelligent astrophysicist, drawn to Maverick's danger, his impulsivity. And he's intrigued by her. Well, her intellect, her composure, their scenes. Nice counterpoint to all that testosterone-fueled action.
I was going to say, like that push and pull creates this electric energy that jumps off the page. But okay, let's talk about the screenplay structure. Visually, what stands out to you?
Oh, it's incredibly cinematic. The action sequences, so well written. You can practically see them playing out in your mind as you read. And the way they use technical jargon, woven right into the dialogue, adds authenticity. Never overwhelming.
Right. It's like you're right there in the cockpit.
Yeah.
Feeling the G-forces, hearing the roar of the engines. And it's not just action either. There's humor, drama, even moments of real emotional weight.
Skillfully balanced.
So well balanced.
The pacing, too, keeps you on the edge of your seat. Heart-stopping aerial sequences, intense competition at Top Gun, those personal moments.
Okay, so we've got this incredible script, compelling characters, high-octane blend of action and emotion. But I think we've got to acknowledge the cultural context, too, right?
Yeah.
This film came out in 1985, height of the Cold War.
Oh, absolutely. There was this real anxiety, tension in the world. And Top Gun, it tapped into that, offered this escapist fantasy, American power, elite pilots defending freedom. Played right into the fears and aspirations of the time.
Captured the zeitgeist perfectly. Gave people heroes, patriotism, and explosions. Lots of cool explosions. No wonder it became such a phenomenon.
And it appealed to a very specific audience, too. Young men, mostly. Drawn to the action, the military hardware, the idea of pushing boundaries.
Tailor-made, almost.
Yeah.
But there's something about it that transcends that target audience, right? I mean, it's still so popular today.
It is. And that's the magic of a great screenplay, I think. It taps into those universal themes: ambition, competition, desire for belonging, the thrill of pushing yourself. Resonates with people no matter what.
Okay, but here's the million-dollar question. Why did it take so long for a sequel? We're talking decades.
That is a great question. I think there are probably several factors at play. There was a definite cultural shift away from militaristic themes in the years after the Cold War ended.
Yeah, like the world moved on. The idea of a gung-ho military movie didn't have the same appeal anymore.
Exactly. Plus, replicating the magic of the original. No easy feat. You've got the iconic soundtrack, the chemistry, that specific 80s energy. It's lightning in a bottle.
You said it. But even beyond that, I wonder if there wasn't also a sense of, why mess with perfection? Oh, the original's so beloved, so iconic. Maybe there was a fear that a sequel would just tarnish its legacy.
That's a really good point. Sometimes it's better to leave a classic untouched rather than risk diminishing its impact.
You're saying it was a combination of cultural shifts, the challenge of recapturing the magic, and maybe even a bit of fear.
Precisely. It makes you wonder, what finally changed? What made the time right for Top Gun Maverick? But let's save that for later. Right now, I want to go back to the original screenplay, dig into some of those specific scenes.
I am all for it. Let's strap in and hit the afterburners. I'm ready for more Top Gun action. Welcome back. We've been breaking down the Top Gun screenplay, and I think it's time to really dig into what makes it tick. You mentioned earlier the balance between the technical details and the emotional depth. That's a tough line to walk. How do you think it manages that so well? It's like we get these glimpses behind the aviator sunglasses, One scene that always gets me. When Maverick visits his dad's old wingman, it's not about dogfights or buzzing the tower, but it reveals so much about Maverick's struggles.
Absolutely. Adds a whole other layer to his character. Dealing with his father's legacy, the pressure to live up to expectations, and his own fear of failure, too. It's a good reminder that even these hotshot pilots are human. They have real emotions.
Makes you root for him even more, because you see his vulnerabilities. He's not just a fearless daredevil. He's a guy carrying a lot of baggage. And speaking of baggage, let's talk about the film's target audience. Who do you think the filmmakers had in mind when they were crafting this story?
On the surface, it's aimed squarely at young men, especially those fascinated by aviation and the military, the action, the competition, the camaraderie. All very appealing to that demographic.
Right, like a recruitment ad come to life almost, with all the cool jets and the heroic pilots. But I think it goes beyond that, don't you think?
Definitely. At its core, Top Gun is about those universal themes: ambition, rivalry, the desire to belong, overcoming self-doubt. These are things everyone can relate to, regardless of whether they've ever dreamt of flying a fighter jet.
It's that human element that gives the film its staying power. It's not just a flashy action flick. It's a story about people pushing themselves to their limits, physically and emotionally. And the way the screenplay structures those high-stakes action sequences, masterful. It's not just planes flying around. There's real tension and strategy.
The training exercises at Top Gun are a big part of that. They introduce us to the rules of engagement, the tactics, the potential consequences of making a mistake in the air. It's like a chess match played out at supersonic speeds.
And those scenes, they're not just about the spectacle. They're about character development, too. We see Maverick pushing the limits, learning from his mistakes, butting heads with Iceman. It's all building towards those climactic combat scenes.
Exactly. By the time we get to those final battles, we understand what's at stake. We've seen the pilots hone their skills, and we're fully invested in their success. But let's not forget the romance either. It's not just there to provide eye candy. It adds another layer to the story.
You're so right. The relationship between Maverick and Charlie, it's more than just a typical Hollywood romance. Charlie represents a world outside of that hyper-masculine environments of Top Gun, and she challenges Maverick's worldview.
She's intelligent, independent. She doesn't put up with his reckless behavior. Their relationship forces Maverick to confront his own vulnerabilities, to grow as a person, not just as a pilot. And the chemistry between them, it's undeniable.
It adds a whole other dimension of tension and attraction to the film, doesn't it? Speaking of tension, let's talk about the film's portrayal of masculinity. It's a theme that runs throughout the story, and it's been the subject of much discussion over the years.
Yeah, the film definitely presents a very specific vision of masculinity, one tied to physical prowess, competition, and emotional stoicism. But I think it also subtly subverts some of those traditional notions, too.
I agree. Like when Cougar breaks down after that near-fatal landing during the typhoon.
Right.
Or when Maverick struggles to cope with Goose's death. These scenes show that even the toughest guys have their limit.
Exactly. It humanizes them. Reminds us that there's a cost to repressing emotions, to always putting on a brave face. It's a powerful message, especially for young men who might feel pressured to conform to those traditional masculine ideals.
It's like the film is saying it's okay to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to express your feelings. And that message, it's still relevant today when we're talking more openly about mental health and challenging those outdated notions of masculinity.
Speaking of relevance, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the film's enduring popularity. It's been almost 40 years since Top Gun was released, but it still has a massive following. What do you think accounts for its staying power?
It's a combination of factors, I think. The timeless appeal of flight, pushing boundaries, achieving something extraordinary, and the way the screenplay blends action, romance, and emotional depth. It's a crowd pleaser, but it also has heart.
It's like comfort food for the soul. You know what you're going to get. Thrilling action, memorable characters, a satisfying ending. But it never gets old. And those iconic lines, "I feel the need for speed." Talk to me, Goose. You can be my wingman anytime. They become part of our cultural lexicon.
They're pure gold, testament to the screenplay's ability to create memorable characters and dialogue.
And the music. We can't forget the music, that soundtrack. Pure 80s magic, perfectly integrated into the film. From Danger Zone in the opening scene to the romantic ballad, "Take My Breath Away," the music elevates every scene.
It's like the soundtrack is another character. amplifying the emotions, adding to the overall impact. But let's circle back to something we touched on earlier, the long wait for a sequel. Top Gun, Maverick, finally arrived in 2022. Over 35 years after the original. What do you think finally made the time right for a sequel?
That's a great question. I think there are a few things to consider. First, there's nostalgia. There's a whole generation that grew up with Top Gun. And there's a real hunger to revisit those characters and that world.
It's like a yearning for a simpler time, a time when things seemed less complicated. And America was at the top of its game.
Exactly. And Top Gun. Maverick taps into that nostalgia beautifully. Familiar faces, iconic imagery, even some of the original music. But it also updates the story for a new generation.
You're right. It's not just a rehash. It tackles new themes, new characters, explores Maverick's journey in a way that feels authentic and engaging.
But I think the key to the sequel's success, Tom Cruise, he's still a huge star. And he was passionate about making this film. He brought the same level of intensity and commitment to Top Gun, Maverick, that he brought to the original. And you can see that in every frame.
He's like the driving force behind the whole project. His dedication really shows. But okay, let's get back to the screenplay itself. One thing that struck me, the way the writers handle the technical details of flying. It's a complex subject, but they make it accessible.
Totally. They strike that perfect balance between realism and entertainment. Just enough jargon to make it feel authentic, but they never get bogged down in technicalities. And they explain the basics of aerial combat so well, even for someone who's never set foot in a cockpit.
They found that sweet spot where the audience feels like they're getting a glimpse into the world of naval aviation, but they're never overwhelmed.
And the visual storytelling, masterful. The way they describe the dogfights, the maneuvers, the tension in the cockpit, you can practically feel the G-forces pulling on you.
It's so cinematic. No wonder this script translated so well to the big screen.
And that's ultimately what makes the Top Gun screenplay so effective. Compelling characters, a thrilling plot, and a script that blends action, romance, and emotional depth. It's a formula that's resonated with audiences for decades. And it's a testament to the power of great storytelling.
Well said. Now let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll wrap up our Top Gun deep dive with some final thoughts on its legacy and what it tells us about storytelling, heroism, and the enduring appeal of flying high. All right, we're back for the final leg of our Top Gun deep dive. It's amazing how this film has stayed relevant for so long. Not just a product of its time, a real cultural touchstone.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of that appeal comes back to the screenplay. It captures something essential about being human, that desire to push boundaries, to test our limits, to achieve something extraordinary.
It's like that primal yearning for adventure, right? That chance to prove ourselves. And the way it mixes those themes with the action, the characters, it's cinematic magic.
You got it. And the screenplay, it doesn't shy away from the emotional stuff either. Yeah, we get those dogfights and the rivalry, but there's real depth there too. Maverick coming to terms with his father's legacy, or dealing with the loss of Goose.
Man, those moments hit hard. They remind us that beneath all the bravado, the need for speed, these are people with real emotions.
And that makes them even more relatable, maybe even heroic in a way.
I think so.
The screenplay lets us see behind the masks, connect with these characters on a human level. That's what makes Top Gun more than just an action movie.
It celebrates ambition, courage, the pursuit of excellence. But it also acknowledges the risks, the sacrifices.
The emotional toll.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's adrenaline and heart. And that's why it still resonates, I think. We're still drawn to stories about people who dream big, who face their fears, who want to be the best versions of themselves.
It's like Top Gun gives us a blueprint. For a life without limits, most of us won't ever fly an F-14, but we can connect with that desire to soar, to push ourselves.
To achieve something extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's a story that speaks to our potential, that we can achieve anything if we set our minds to it and put in the work.
And that message is timeless.
It is.
It goes beyond generations and cultures. That's the power of a great screenplay. It captures something universal, something that stays with you long after the credits roll.
Well said. As we wrap up our Top Gun deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What about this film speaks to you? What parts of the story resonate with you the most?
It's a great question to think about.
Yeah.
Because the power of any great story is its ability to connect with us personally, to make us feel something, to inspire us to dream bigger and to live more courageously.
And the Top Gun screenplay definitely does that. It's a thrilling ride, a celebration of what we can do, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventure is the one we take within ourselves.
So until next time, keep your wings level
and
your spirits high.